We have got an all-star panel coming up for you next. Right? Dr. Paul, he fought for liberty in the legislature for so many years, as Matt alluded to, oftentimes being the only voice of reason, which means voting no because he's actually reading the bills and sees what's in them, right? And so we've got 3 liberty legislators coming up who are fighting on their own front, who have fought on their own front to try and be that lone voice of reason, oftentimes in their own capitals. And so on this panel, we've got 3 great folks. We've got former state senator Eric Brakey out of Maine, current executive director of the Free State Project. We've got former congressman and champion for civil liberties and privacy, Justin Amash. And we've got current congressman and Texas firebrand, Mr. Chip Roy. So let's give him a warm welcome. Come on down. Now, I know they're back there, so I guess they just can't hear me. I'll go get them. That is really good soundproofing. Let's give a round of applause to the Dow for the soundproofing.
Mic on? Oh, there's Chip's mic. All right. Can you all hear me all right? Yes? No? All right. Sounds like you can now. All right. Well, hello. So glad and honored to be here to celebrate the good doctor's 90th birthday. And glad to be here with all of you. My name is Eric Brakey. I am a former retired 3-term state senator from Maine, and I got my start in politics as the Maine state director for Ron Paul's 2012 presidential campaign. And now I left Maine recently to go run an outfit called the Free State Project in New Hampshire. We're building the libertarian homeland. It is my real pleasure today to have been asked to moderate this discussion between 2 great champions of liberty who have taken the fight in their respective careers into the belly of the beast, into the swampiest of the swamps. We have, well, both to my left, though maybe politically, I don't know. Chip Roy might be a little to my right. I don't know. We'll see. But I have the great former congressman from Michigan, Justin Amash. And current congressman from Texas in the Austin area, where I was briefly his constituent when I worked at Young Americans for Liberty, Chip Roy. If you'd like to, I guess, just say a little bit first, introduce yourselves, and then we can get into the topic, which is carrying the torch of liberty in legislative bodies, which we've all had some experience with, though these guys at a swampier level than I have.
Well, okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, okay. Good. It's hard for me to tell up here. So I'll say I'm like an OG Ron Paul person. I'm from the good old days, Gen 1 Ron Paul. I got introduced to Ron Paul a long time ago and was a supporter of his when he ran for president the first time. And I was running for state house at that time. And I was so excited to have a presidential candidate there on the ballot that I could vote for in that primary at the same time that I was running for office. And I got elected to the state house, fortunately. And, you know, Ron was a big inspiration to me as a person who would stand up and do the right thing regardless of party, regardless of the pressure, was willing to go it alone. I went into the state house, was often on the losing end of 109 to 1 votes. I think I broke the record in the state house for most 109 to 1 votes. And people told me it was going to be to my detriment that I was doing this, but then the very next cycle I got elected to Congress, because people trusted me, because they believed that I was there to do the right thing, to fight for them, and wasn't just going to go play the game. And so I served in Congress. I was fortunate to serve in Congress with Ron for a term, and that was really like a magical experience. To be there with him on the House floor, to get to go talk to him, ask his opinion on things. I owe a lot of who I became as a legislator to Ron Paul, and I'm just honored to be here today so we can have this conversation and celebrate his birthday. Happy birthday, Ron.
Well, it's great to be here. I drove down from Austin because it's just such an important event to honor Ron Paul, who as someone who is part of the Freedom Caucus, is part of conservatives on Capitol Hill, I can't tell you how many times right now you keep hearing the phrase, man, Ron Paul was right. Right? It's just happening all the time, whether you're talking about the Federal Reserve or whether you're talking about the current state of limited government, and how much he had an impact on the overall philosophy. And I was just talking to some of the guys at Reason Magazine, Nick and others, about where are we right now in terms of Tea Party, in terms of MAGA, in terms of the legacy of where we currently stand, the Freedom Caucus, and all these various forces. And look, at some point, people have to recognize the legacy of Dr. Paul. I mean, is so significant because it endures, and because it's based on principle, and it's because it's based on philosophy that I think will sustain generations. It doesn't ebb and flow with a given moment. And that's something I just want to say. I did not get a chance to overlap with Ron in the House. I'm proud to serve with Rand and he's in the Senate. We're always conspiring together, and I was proud to serve alongside Justin for 2 terms. And it's fantastic to be here. I don't want to drone on and on. I will just say this, one kind of little opening. I do represent the area, Kerrville in central Texas in the Hill Country. And obviously we had the floods that we just dealt with. I just want to appreciate all the prayers, all the support, and just give a shout out to what it means to come together as a community and not look and go begging for the federal government to come solve all your problems. We've had $100 million raised and counting coming into the Community Foundation of the Hill Country, people all across the country, volunteers who came in to help. It's the right way to do things, to support your community. It's focused on local government and state government, and not looking to faraway governments like the federal government to solve your problems. So it's a good testament to what the spirit of Texas and the right way to do things. So I just want to thank everybody for your prayers and support.
All right, my first question is for Justin. Justin, I remember the first time I ever saw you in person. I was a young liberty activist at the 2011 CPAC. A bunch of Ron Paul ragamuffins. We all showed up there to vote for Ron in the CPAC straw poll. And he won, actually, that straw poll that year. And showing that Ron Paul had the support of the youth of the conservative base. And I remember there was this divide at CPAC. There was like this event that night where all the old school, kind of the more kind of establishment young Republicans, they went to go like eat a cake with Ronald Reagan's face on it, celebrating his birthday. But when there was an event with Rand and Ron and this new congressman from Michigan, Justin Amash. And I remember, Justin, you came out, you gave a great speech. I remember this was the Tea Party era. There's just been this big sweep through Congress, and I think a lot of optimism. You seemed pretty optimistic yourself at the time. I wonder how your perspective from that moment through the years that you spent in Congress. I know you'd already had the experience being in your state legislature. What lessons from that moment on did you kind of learn about being in the center of Congress?
Well, it's tough. I mean, Ron was there doing the work for so many years, often by himself, with no help, no one there to back him up. I was excited to get in there and be that second voice of reason, to help Ron, to be the other person who could stand up. And then, fortunately, Thomas Massie came along soon after that, and and he was just a godsend. I was like, okay, Ron's on his way out, and thank God Thomas Massey has shown up.
He seems to have a lot more gray in his beard since you've left Congress.
Yeah, he's looking he's looking good though, Thomas Massey. Since so he was a godsend, to have that other person there who's willing to fight, stand up, and do the right thing. The thing is, when you're over there, it's such an uphill battle. I mean, you are outnumbered by hundreds of people. Like, just to get 10 people to vote the right way takes a monumental effort. You really have to pull out all the stops. So just to get 10, 15 people, and the hardest part when you're there is realizing that a lot of the people who tell you they're with you, they're not really with you. So you might start with 20 people who say, we're with you, we're 100% with you. And they'll tell the leadership team, yeah, we're sticking with Justin and Thomas, and we're going to do the right thing. And then by the time the actual vote comes around, it's just down to you and Thomas back in those days. So it's a very difficult challenge. And, I feel for people like Chip, who's over there, he's fighting the good fight. Thomas is still there fighting the good fight. There are a few others, but it really is an incredible challenge. And I think that it's going to require all of us working together, trying to build this movement. You're not going to be saved by members of Congress, okay? You're going to have to save yourselves, right? It's going to have to be people at home saying, we've had enough of this, and working together to find a new way forward. And that might mean trying to elect better representatives, but it also might mean doing things in your community to really change the mindset and the culture so that it's a lot easier to get people into Congress who are doing the right thing. And I just found that over time, as I was in Congress, it became more and more challenging. I feel like people were pulling further and further away from what was right. And by the time I left Congress, I felt like we were mostly just going through the motions every day. Chip knows this. You can't even really amend legislation anymore. There's very little you're able to do on a daily basis. And it's really discouraging for people who want to fight the good fight. It's very discouraging because we can't even get our ideas on the floor for a vote. So we can't even make the case because the leadership says, no, you can't have that vote. So that's very difficult.
And Chip, I'd love to ask you, I know that certainly one of the balancing acts for any state legislator with principles is trying to find that balance between our idealism, the ideas that we believe in, and being pure to those. And certainly I think Ron Paul represents kind of that model of I'm sticking for what I think is right no matter what, versus some people have pointed to Rand Paul as taking more of a pragmatic approach and trying to find the way to thread the needle to advance the ball, even if you're getting 80% of what you want instead of 100% of what you want. How do you, in your role as a congressman currently serving, how do you try to find that balance between idealism and being pragmatic in terms of your work in Congress?
Well, that, first of all, let me just say in agreement with Justin about how it is in Congress. And if you go back to the speaker fight of a couple of years ago with respect to McCarthy, all of our efforts at the time were designed to try to open that process back up, to increase amendments, to be able to get more votes on the floor, to get more representation in committees, to have more ability to amend. And frankly, it worked for a bit. And it occasionally kind of still works by virtue of how we populated the committees. We've forced some changes. So there are some improvements, but it's still, the town is pre-wired to kind of preset move things through. And so you don't really have open debate. So Justin's right, but we're making some headway in getting people to understand that, but it hasn't fundamentally changed to be an open system where you can just offer amendments on the floor, which then goes to the question at hand. And it's probably the most difficult question. At least for me, trying to figure out, and particularly right now, when you figure out, all right, what am I going to push for? And then if you push for those things, if you get some or a large portion of them, do you vote then for something you don't otherwise like? That happens, like pretty much every vote I take is that. And so you're going, all right, well, I mean, we can sit here and go through a debate on, let's say, the big, beautiful bill, right? at the end of the day, when you're pushing up through 3 o'clock in the morning on the vote, after you have been one of 4 people who killed it in the budget committee, to force Republicans to recognize that if you're going to cut taxes, which I support, that you need to have spending reductions go along with that in a package. And we were able to deliver that as a principle, although you didn't get the spending cuts that I wanted, the total number. But we get $1 trillion of Medicaid cuts when I was told by the White House, we're not touching Medicaid. Or when we deliver about $400 or $500 billion of reductions in the green new scam subsidies, when we get work requirements on Medicaid and on food stamps, going, all right, well, we fought like hell to get these things, but it's like 30% of what I wanted, right, or a fraction of what I wanted. If I walk away from that, then what? And you start working through the path from that point forward, and what will happen? And will a bad deal be cut by moderates that will result in tax cuts we don't all love and spending that we don't all love and just perpetuation of the same system? I'm summarizing a lot really quickly in a complicated bill. That's the debate. And you have to just look at it and go, all right, well, did I get enough here to be able to say, I can look myself in the mirror and think that I made this stuff better by pushing us in that direction. There are things that we've done that I'm proud of. There are things that are a continuation of the same system. There's a reason we're $37 trillion in debt. I'm sitting there in the Rules Committee putting up charts showing what we're going to be doing to deficits and front loading in the spending that's going to increase deficits with savings in the out years. Justin knows, well, the out year savings never materialize. So you're putting forward all this stuff and you're trying to push it, and then you push that and you leverage that to get something and you get it. Then you go, well, now am I obligated to support it because I was in the room demanding I get X, trying to move the ball down the field. That's where we are right now. And, different people land on different, results. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we are so far away as a Congress, from actually taking seriously our obligation in the spirit of Ron Paul, whom we're here to celebrate, to actually balance the budget, that I can't even put it into words. It's so far off that people like me are left going, all right, the Titanic, there's the iceberg. I'm just grabbing the wheel, and my own party is pulling the wheel in the wrong direction, and you're grabbing the wheel and pulling it as hard as you can, and you're just hoping we can miss the iceberg. That's where we are.
It's a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah.
Justin, I want to ask you, now you, as established, you have the experience of both serving in Congress and also serving in your state legislature. And I know that the example that while there are many paths to advance liberty, Ron Paul certainly established an example of one way to operate on the political path. And many people inspired by him, like you, like me, like so many others, have run for office one way or another, some running for federal office and succeeding, some running for the state legislature. And I guess from your experience, if you were to advise, let's say there is a principled, liberty-loving person right here in the audience today who's actively considering running for office, and they have a choice to run for the U.S. House or run for the State House. What advice would you give them?
Well, if you're just starting out, I'd run for the State House. I wouldn't run for the U.S. House. First of all, campaigns have become so much more complicated at the federal level. The amount of money you have to raise now to run for office, especially as someone new who doesn't have a lot of experience, is incredible. You have to overcome enormous pushback, all of the funding that's going to come in from super PACs and others who are going to be pushing not for you, but for the establishment candidate. And a lot of times the establishment candidates these days are disguised as conservatives. So they come in and they'll talk like they're conservative, and they're pushed as though they're the big conservative. But the truth is they're backed completely by the establishment, and the people in Washington know that when they get in there, they're going to fall in line, and that's why they're supporting them. And this is especially dangerous if you're running against a candidate who has no political experience, so you can't prove that they're going to be bad, but you know who's pushing them and who's backing them. So it's an uphill battle. I would say you have to start local, start at the very highest level. You'd start as maybe running for a state office like a state representative or something similar. And the nice thing about those offices is that you can go door to door. You can knock on all the doors in the community. You can meet all the people. You can go to all the events. It's a lot easier than when you're going in a much larger district and you have to meet all sorts of new people, and most of them don't even know who you are. So start with the people you know, try to build a good reputation, and understand that you're in it for the long run. It's not just this one battle. You're trying to win this seat so that maybe 5 or 6 years down the road, maybe 10 years down the road, you'll run for a federal office. So you have to think about the long run. And I think we do have to build up those individuals who are sort of the next generation of Ron Paul-style legislators. We have to build them up at the local level so that they'll be there later on. And then you hope and pray that when they finally do make it to the federal level, that they stay true to their principles, because that's a whole nother challenge, and that's increasingly difficult as well for people to do. You see people come in, and in the first 6 months, they're like, I used to have this all the time. They'd come up to me, Justin Amash, I'm such a fan. I'm going to just vote the way you do. I'm going to look at how you vote, and I'm going to vote that way. I'm like, okay, let's slow down here. Let's talk. And, the first 6 months they're like that. I've had new members of Congress asking for my autograph. And then 6 months later, they're completely voting with the leadership team. And they don't even talk to me anymore. So this is what happens in Washington. And so we have to first, as I said earlier, let's change the culture. All of you have to help do that at home. You talk to your neighbors, your community, you go to your churches. That's how you change the culture first, and then you try to build from there to have a political system that will actually, be producing liberty results for everyone.
Chip, same question for you. To the hypothetical, we can applaud Justin. Yeah, sure. To the hypothetical liberty person in the audience today who's thinking about running for something, what advice would you give them?
I agree with Justin, not just for the practical reason of the difficulty of running congressionally versus state, and it's more because your better chance of affecting your community and being able to make it a freer and better place is massively higher at the state and local level. And, places like Texas, and I don't know what the mix is of Texans versus non-Texans in the room. It's probably a significant number of Texans. But, Texas is a great state, and I'm proud of this state. But Texas isn't as free as it needs to be. It's highly regulated. It has lots of issues we've got to deal with the size and scope of the Texas government. Texas isn't as safe as it needs to be. Texas isn't as, as strong as it needs to be with respect to our school systems. You can go down the list of things that we need to improve in Texas. That's where I'd start, because that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of whether you're living free or not, whether you can open a business or not, whether you can send your kids to the school of your choice or not, whether you can, be safe and secure in your homes and be able to have your Second Amendment rights protected by local law enforcement authorities, or have DAs and prosecutors who are treating you fairly, and all of those things that you need to do at the local level. Those things impact your life directly. Basically, what we're doing up in Washington is trying to minimize the damage, keep Congress out of your life, and try to minimize spending. That's basically what we spend all of our time doing. And look, I want to say on the more positive, right, because it does merit saying that this movement of the last 15 years, which I'd call post-Tea Party, Freedom Caucus, MAGA, this movement pushing back on some of the old, call it establishment Republican guard, is real and is taking hold. And I think there's some generational recognition of what needs to change. And, for example, we got a massive expansion of direct primary care and the use of health savings accounts in that bill that we passed. We were able to get some significant reforms with respect to the tax policy on silencers and with respect to short barrels, but we weren't able to get where we wanted to go on the NFA generally, right? We were able to get incremental gains on some of these things that 5 years ago we would have been laughed away, right? We made serious changes with respect to those subsidies that were going out that undermine our energy system. All of those things are things that are real and responsive that literally We couldn't get any of that stuff done. We have a group of people that's able to hold the line. Take FISA, for example. I didn't think FISA should have been reauthorized. I voted against it. But by using the rules of the House and what we've done through the Speaker's vote, we forced it to a 2-year reauthorization instead of 5. We forced a whole bunch of reforms to it, but we got beat on the warrant question. Well, guess what? Because we made it a 2-year fight, that's back up next April. The old guard would have demanded that for 5 or 10 years, and we wouldn't have seen the light of day. So my point of bringing that up is we're making the incremental gains. So stay in the fight and do the fight state and locally, and then at the federal level, just stay on the issues we care about, making sure our liberties are protected. For example, we'll be fighting FISA again next April.
With the last few minutes, I want to ask Justin, watching your career over the many years, I was particularly impressed when there seemed to be, especially around issues of civil liberties and privacy, that you were able to pull together these large bipartisan coalitions that always looked just on the cusp of actually changing something. And then always, interestingly, it would seem to fail by like one vote. After a while of seeing wow, it seems like the important things fail by one vote a lot.
That Warren Amendment failed by one vote on FISA.
What can you tell us as we kind of to peel back the onion of Washington, D.C.? Why do so many important things fail by one vote?
Well, first, to go back to the discussion of bringing together coalitions, that's something I saw Ron Paul doing. Ron Paul was willing to work with anyone. If he had to work with Democrats to advance privacy, he was willing to do so. If he had to work with Democrats to stop wars, he was willing to do so. And that's one thing I learned. You can't just say, okay, I'm a Republican, I'm only going to work with Republicans, I'm not going to talk to Democrats. If you do that, you're not going to advance your cause, because a lot of times the parties overlap on many of the issues. In fact, on most important issues, they're actually quite aligned on a lot of things, aligned in the wrong direction. And then there are some issues where you will find people on both sides of the aisle aligned in the right direction. And so you have to be willing to put those coalitions together. And so I wasn't afraid to cross the aisle, to bring Democrats over and say, hey, will you work with me on this issue? Now, the truth is, when you do that, the leadership team gets really nervous. The thing that scares them the most is when you put together these coalitions that cross normal partisan divides, where you're able to bring people together who aren't normally aligned. They don't know how to handle that. They like to make Washington into something that is just clear-cut. Republicans do this, Democrats do that. And then they sell it that way. So as soon as it starts to cross party lines like that, it becomes very difficult for the leadership team. And then they have to pull out all the stops to try to stop you. And they will usually, through a bunch of incentives, peel off enough people so that you lose by 1 vote or 2 votes or something very small. And they have that power because the leadership teams can decide your committee assignments. They can decide whether you're a chairman of a committee or a subcommittee. They will decide whether you have a primary opponent. They will decide all sorts of things that affect your ability to move forward. I remember Kevin McCarthy running up to me and telling me he wasn't going to take me out to steak dinners anymore. And I was like, what do I care about the steak dinners? What are you talking about? But apparently that works on a lot of people. They want to go to the steak dinners. And this is like early on where he told me this. They will find ways to get at you, but we have to keep pushing forward. Ron Paul was hopeful in his message. I think there is that hope that we can work together, that we can come together, set aside all the partisan nonsense, and work together to move forward for liberty. And I really believe we will have that future. I think that we can do it as a group if we all work together. But it's going to take people at home bringing it on and working hard in their communities.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Chip?
I mean, Justin just said it very well. And look, I was trying to get to it a minute ago, and we're coming down to the last few minutes. But we should not ignore the great strides that we've made on issues of liberty. We have done extraordinary wonders defending core components of liberty. And we have increasing and growing coalitions on a lot of those fronts. I walked through the FISA issue. We made a lot of strides there, against the establishment. And I think we've made some improvements, and we're now standing in a place where next spring maybe we can go where we need to go on that. The Second Amendment and gun rights and other things that we've been able to make progress on. So make sure that, going forward, that's the core, and we're here to celebrate Ron. That whole notion of liberty and limited government is the core of who we are as Americans and who we are as Texans. That's who we are. And if we lose that, we've got nothing. Okay? We've got nothing other than our faith in the Lord Almighty. But in terms of this earth, living free is critical to our ability to be able to prosper and to be able to take the fruits of all of the people who have come before us and then pass that down to our kids and grandkids. We're fighting for it. Justin's fighting for it now out of Congress. I'm fighting for it in Congress. If you're in a state legislature anywhere, keep fighting for it, because that's the enduring principle. I think we're making progress, to Justin's point. And we've, there are things that I've saddled up with Democrats on, authorizations of the use of military force and trying to end those, because we've got several of those bills and we're trying to work to do that. Whether it's, we're trying to, this maybe not a core liberty thing, but I'm actually trying to restrict the ability of members of Congress to trade stocks, because I think it is a conflict of interest for while they're doing their job. So, I've got more Democrats on that bill than I do Republicans, and that's what I'm working on right now to try to get it passed this fall. So there's a lot of things we're doing to make Congress better, more effective, and make this country freer. So God bless Ron Paul for being such a great inspiration to all of us and for his service, and God bless all of you for being here to celebrate him.
Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you to Congressman Amash, thank you to Congressman Roy for this conversation, and I also just want to do one quick shameless plug, which is in New Hampshire, where the Free State Project exists, we have succeeded in electing nearly 100 Ron Paul-style liberty legislators to the state capitol there. We are constantly looking for folks to come and visit the events that we do, but you don't even have to do that. I want to ask you, in the transition right now, if you want to hear about what's going on with all the liberty stuff and happening in the legislature in New Hampshire, go during the transition to fsp.org and sign up for our newsletter. So hopefully Sean Tiemann won't get too mad at me for plugging things. But let's give another round of applause to two great congressmen here with us today.